There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic.
Disney just pulled the plug. Every single live-action remake canceled. And it all started with one movie, Snow White. The backlash was so brutal, so relentless, that it didn't just tank a film, it shattered Disney's entire remake strategy. Billion-dollar projects, scrapped, future classics, dead in the water. What the hell happened? And is this the end of Disney's live-action empire? Buckle up. This is the full story of how Snow White broke Disney. Obsessed with celeb gossip? Smash that subscribe for Sara's gossip! We sling fresh, unfiltered star drama daily. Hurry! Next bombshell's dropping soon.
Jonah Platt, whose father helped produce the latest Snow White film, had some very harsh words for star Rachel Zegler.
For context, Variety wrote a report recently titled Inside Disney's Snow White Fiasco, Death Threats, Beefed Up Security, and a Social Media Guru for Rachel Zegler.
Before the first teaser even dropped, the Snow White live-action remake was already in hot water. What started as murmurs of concern online quickly snowballed into full-scale outrage. Critics, fans, and even casual observers slammed the project for feeling tonally confused, overly preachy, and completely divorced from the charm of the 1937 classic. Instead of excitement, the film's early announcements sparked unease.
So even though woke in some sense feels like it's dead, it still has to run its course through the system. The ghosts have to get out of the machine in essence.
Then came the leaks. Test screening reports flooded forums, Reddit threads, and YouTube channels. People said the film didn't know what it wanted to be. Part modern empowerment anthem, part nostalgic fairy tale, but failing at both. When the first visuals dropped, including images of Snow White surrounded not by dwarfs, but by a diverse group of mystical companions, the internet erupted. Many felt it was change for the sake of change.
A company like Disney so up against it. Why? Because it doubled down on DEI. And I think Snow White has become the pinnacle of this. You know, this is going to go down in history as an asterisk next to Rachel Zegler's name, Rachel Zegler.
Viral clips tore into the perceived rewriting of a beloved story, calling it soulless and corporate wokeness run wild. What should have been a celebration of an iconic tale became a PR nightmare. Disney didn't just lose the room, they lost the entire internet.
I don't really care about that. What I care about is how she hated the story because it needed to be wokeified, and she hated the fact that there was going to be a Prince Charming of some sort, and they needed to update it. And then what do you know? They try all this updating, they get this lousy screenwriter, in my estimation, because I saw this thing and it was awful, like really bad.
Suddenly, everyone from conservative commentators to die-hard Disney adults had the remake in their crosshairs, creating a domino effect of skepticism and mockery that only gained momentum. The backlash had grown too loud to ignore, and the film hadn't even hit theaters yet.
And there was no tension, there was no drama, there was like nothing in that set. All it was an empty movie that was done.
As backlash intensified, Rachel Zegler, the film's young lead, found herself thrust into the spotlight, not for her performance, but for her off-screen comments. Meant to defend the film, her interviews often came across as dismissive or sarcastic, especially when she brushed off the original movie as outdated and problematic. "We're not doing that 1937 version," she said in one viral clip. That single quote became fuel for critics, who claimed she didn't respect the source material. Memes exploded. Hashtags like "Not My Snow White" and "Fire Ziegler" trended. Then came the bombshell. A viral, unverified rumor claimed she was briefly detained after a heated encounter with critics. While likely untrue, the story spread like wildfire. Suddenly, Ziegler wasn't just an actress, she was seen as combative, entitled, even hostile to the fan base. Every old tweet, every facial expression in press interviews was dissected. Was she being sarcastic? Was she mocking the original story? The internet decided she was, and ran with it. She became the unwilling mascot of everything people felt was wrong with the remake. Whether fair or not, Ziegler's image was now intertwined with the film's failure. And just like that, a rising star became a lightning rod caught in a storm that seemed to get darker by the day. What really pushed the Snow White remake over the edge wasn't just casting or visuals, it was the growing perception that the film cared more about modern messaging than telling a compelling story. Viewers accused the movie of being a checklist, of progressive themes delivered with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Gone was the emotional arc of the original. Instead, audiences were served a series of clunky, awkward scenes that barely connected. Dialogue felt stilted, characters seemed like mouthpieces, not people, and the beloved elements, like the iconic Mirror, Mirror, or the forest chase, were either gutted or reworked so drastically that they lost their impact. Critics pointed out that in trying to be everything modern, the film forgot to be magical. Where was the wonder? Where was the heart? Even Disney loyalists admitted the film felt like a lecture wrapped in fantasy costumes. Some defended the message. But even they couldn't ignore the messy structure and emotional flatness. It didn't feel like a reimagining. It felt like a correction. And corrections, especially to something as cherished as Snow White, tend to alienate before they inspire. What could have been a bold update instead became a case study in how storytelling gets lost when ideology takes the driver's seat. The situation worsened when details from early test screenings began leaking online, and they weren't pretty. Audience reactions painted a picture of a film in crisis. Viewers described it as incoherent, with tone shifts that felt whiplash-inducing. Scenes jumped awkwardly from one emotion to another without setup or payoff. Key plot points were reportedly missing, suggesting either extreme editing or a rushed script. Some sequences felt like reshoots stitched onto an entirely different movie. A musical number would suddenly interrupt a tense moment. Characters disappeared for long stretches, then reappeared with no explanation. The magic mirror, practically a cameo. The evil queen, underused and oddly portrayed. It was as if Disney had cut and recut the movie trying to find a version that would stick. But each attempt only made things messier. According to insiders, executives were horrified by test audience feedback, prompting last-minute rewrites and emergency reshoots. But the more they tried to fix it, the more Frankenstein-like the film became. The patchwork editing didn't just confuse viewers, it eroded their trust. People didn't see a bold experiment, they saw a studio in panic mode, slapping band-aids on a movie that was already bleeding out. And with each new leak, the narrative spiraled further out of Disney's control. By this point, the Snow White remake wasn't just another film. It had become the poster child for Disney's growing identity crisis. The company had spent years trying to modernize its legacy catalog, walking the tightrope between staying true to beloved classics and aligning with current cultural narratives. But Snow White exposed the flaws in that balancing act. It didn't feel like evolution, it felt like an identity wipe. The original tale, about love, jealousy, kindness, and innocence, was stripped down and reassembled with corporate-approved buzzwords. The core themes lost in translation. And as the backlash grew, the internet latched onto a bigger idea. Disney had forgotten who it was. It wasn't just this movie. Fans pointed to The Little Mermaid, Peter Pan, and Wendy. And even Mulan as signs that the studio's storytelling compass had gone haywire. With Snow White, the disconnect hit harder. The film was supposed to be a triumphant reintroduction of the very first Disney princess. Instead, it became a case study in how not to reinterpret a legacy. Analysts, fans, and creators alike began asking, is Disney even listening anymore? Or are they just chasing headlines and trends? With Snow White at the center, the studio's entire strategy for remakes was now under fire. And suddenly, one film's failure felt like a reckoning years in the making. In previous controversies, Disney could deflect criticism by blaming toxic fandoms or online trolls. But this time, the outcry came from their most loyal fans, the ones who grew up with these stories, collected the merch, and paid to see every remake in theaters. These weren't fringe voices. They were Disney's bread and butter. People who defended The Little Mermaid against racist backlash. People who cried during the live-action Beauty and the Beast. Now, they were openly turning on the studio. That's what made Snow White different. It wasn't a culture war, it was heartbreak. Lifelong fans felt let down, and their frustration showed. TikToks of Disney adults crying over the remake's trailer racked up millions of views. YouTubers who once championed the remakes posted hour-long breakdowns tearing this one apart. Even former Disney animators spoke out, subtly shading the creative choices and lamenting the lack of storytelling heart. The narrative shifted from haters hate to Disney betrayed its core. And once that line was crossed, it was nearly impossible to walk back. For the first time in recent memory, Disney couldn't blame outside forces. The rebellion was coming from inside the Ind castle. What made the Snow White controversy unstoppable wasn't just the content, it was the volume. Social media poured gasoline on every spark. TikTok creators stitched together Ziegler's most controversial quotes, adding sarcastic commentary and dramatic music. Twitter exploded with side-by-side comparisons of old versus new, with captions like "Disney forgot the magic." On YouTube, "Perpinja seeking the regime and supporters warped." Long-form rants broke down every problem in the trailer frame by frame. Memes painted Snow White as the villain, Disney execs as clueless villains, and fans as the betrayed heroes. But it wasn't just critics. Even neutral influencers, people who usually stayed out of drama, began weighing in. The story became too big to ignore. Algorithms rewarded the chaos, pushing negativity to the top of feeds, turning one bad PR moment into a daily trending topic. And for every attempt Disney made to course correct, social media doubled down. A statement here, a clarification there, but it all felt too little, too late. The backlash became self-sustaining. And once content creators realized that talking about the Snow White drama guaranteed views and clicks, the cycle was locked in. The internet had chosen its narrative, and Disney wasn't the hero of this story. Behind the scenes, things were spiraling. According to leaks from inside the Mouse House, the executive floor was in chaos. Meetings turned into firefights, marketing plans were ripped up and rewritten. Projects that had already spent millions in development were suddenly under review. Executives reportedly feared a worst-case scenario, that Snow White's failure would permanently stain Disney's brand. And so, in a move no one saw coming, the studio hit the brakes on every upcoming live-action remake. Even high-profile projects like Hercules, Lilo and Stitch, and Tangled were quietly shelved or halted. Internally, it was framed as a pause, but insiders called it what it really was: a panic move. Disney's billion-dollar remake strategy, once seen as a golden goose, had collapsed in real time. And this wasn't just about one movie anymore. Snow White had triggered a studio-wide reckoning. Every department from creative to PR was now under review. Resources were reallocated, budgets were slashed, teams were told to rethink everything. Disney had finally realized the problem wasn't bad press, it was bad strategy. And if they didn't change course immediately, they risked losing their most valuable asset: public trust. When the news broke that Disney was re-evaluating its live-action remake slate, fans weren't surprised. They were relieved. For years, audiences had watched classic stories be reimagined with mixed results. Some were charming, others felt like cash grabs. But Snow White was the final straw. It was the moment people stopped hoping for improvement and started demanding a reset. Disney responded the only way they could: by pulling the plug. The official statement was filled with PR-friendly language about recalibration and refocusing on quality, but the message was clear: the live-action era was over, at least for now. And honestly, it felt like the right move. The remake formula, once unstoppable, had lost its spark. Nostalgia wasn't enough anymore. Fans wanted authenticity, not algorithms. They wanted imagination, not rebranding. And Snow White proved that no amount of CGI inclusivity or modern dialogue could replace the heart of a well-told story. Disney had ridden the remake wave for nearly a decade, but waves crash, and when they do, it's time to step back or drown. For Disney, this was that moment. Now, the ripple effects of Snow White's implosion are being felt across the entire entertainment industry. Studios that once followed Disney's lead are watching closely, wondering if the remake model is officially dead. Investors are asking tougher questions. Creators are hesitating before signing on to reimaginings. And at the center of it all, Disney is standing at a crossroads. The company that defined modern fairy tales is now struggling to tell its own story. Does it return to original storytelling? Does it double down on safe IP like Marvel and Star Wars? Or does it rediscover what made it magical in the first place? Risk-taking, heart, and wonder. For now, one thing is clear. Audiences are done with surface-level nostalgia. They want depth, they want care, they want storytelling that doesn't talk at them, but with them. And if Disney wants to lead the way again, it'll need to earn back that trust, one story at a time. The Snow White remake didn't just fail, it forced a reckoning. And while the castle still stands, the foundation has been shaken. What Disney does next could define the next decade of entertainment. So what do you think? Is Disney finally learning? its lesson, or is this just another pause before they try again? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. If you found this breakdown interesting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest stories shaking up Hollywood. And hey, if you're still here, you're exactly the kind of viewer we love. Catch you in the next one.